From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Leading the way.
Just ways to enhance either welfare, health, performance.
How building a better cow could soon start here. The latest on the impacts of Hurricane Francine on Gulf Coast crops, as the markets and producers wait and wonder what the Federal Reserve will decide to do this week.
The rest of the world has kind of gotten ahead of the U.S. on rate cuts.
The impact an interest rate cut could have immediately on agriculture, right now on AgDay.
AgDay is brought to you by Pioneer.
Ben's bins, please hold.
Yeah, Ben's has been busy all day.
Seems like no one can keep up with this new Z series. What did you all put in these seeds?
Science.
Good morning, I'm Clint Griffiths. We've been waiting for months for what the Federal Reserve is poised to do later this week. Announce that it's cutting its key interest rate from a 2-decade peak. It could mark the first in a series of rate cuts from the Fed thanks to lower inflation. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us. And Michelle, folks are debating just how big of a cut this first one could be.
Yeah, the market has long been anticipating a rate cut by the Fed in the September meeting, and this would be the first cut in 4 years. The question is not only how big this week's rate cut is, but how many more cuts the Fed could make and when. Regardless, it's positive for American consumers and farmers, as long as the U.S. economy avoids recession. The FOMC's decision to lower interest rates is not a matter of if, but just how much. The market now sees a 63% chance of a half-point cut by the Fed on September 18th, according to the CME FedWatch tool. Others see a quarter point.
The Fed has been much discussed. The only question apparently is whether they're going to do a quarter point rate cut or a 50-point, a half-point rate cut. We're still leaning towards the quarter right now, but that's a last-minute decision on the Fed's part.
However, Brugler says the signals the Fed uses to base their decision are providing justification for a rate cut.
The indicators are showing unemployment has picked up, and certain categories of inflation have slowed down quite a bit. The PCE and the CPI core are still above the 2% target. So the Fed probably doesn't want to be too hasty in cutting rates.
The lower interest rates could help the agricultural markets by attracting some speculative buying and more export business as the U.S. dollar index starts to weaken in respect to other world currencies.
The rest of the world has kind of gotten ahead of the U.S. on rate cuts. EU's done a couple, Canada's done a couple, but that hasn't hurt us. The dollar's still been going down. So we don't want to underestimate the influence that has on U.S. exports for third currency buyers, the Koreans and the Japanese and so forth.
Many analysts believe Fed officials could cut the benchmark federal funds rate from the current 5.25% to 5.5% range to 3% by July 2025. And the lower cost to borrow money is definitely positive for all farmers and consumers. I'm Michelle Rook reporting for AgDay.
The East Coast is dealing with the impacts of a tropical storm. Meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht joins us with the very latest on that.
Yeah, it's a system we were talking about last week, and really the concern was flash flooding in the Carolinas, not necessarily from a category 4 or 5 hurricane, rather a lot of tropical moisture coming through for an extended period of time. Now, as we advance this through, the main circulation, the broad circulation, is going to continue to work kind of inland, but bring the rain, now almost the fire hose effect, back up into northern North Carolina, Virginia, and then extending into the higher terrain of North Carolina. So you think about the potential for mudslides with a number of inches of rainfall in some of those locations, both into North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia in the higher terrain. A pocket of stagnant air, that ridge of high pressure, still over the Midwest. So again, showers through the Dakotas, possibly up into Minnesota and maybe into Wisconsin, but all quiet into the Midwest. Quiet, dry, and hot. And what a great time to be harvesting. John in Alberta, Canada, sharing the spectacular sunset. There he is, proudly displaying the maple leaf on the side of his combine. Hope you're having a great harvest season, John. I'll have more in your forecast coming up.
Hurricane Francine made landfall last week in Terrebonne Parish, Louisiana, as a Category 2 hurricane. It weakened to a tropical depression by last Thursday morning. Now producers have been surveying the damage this week in Louisiana agriculture, which helped keep everyone updated during this storm, sharing these pictures taken in LaForce Parish. You can see a lot of sugarcane down, but producers say it will still be harvested with minimal yield loss. However, there could be issues from all of the heavy rain.
Farther north, we did have some concerns about unharvested cotton, rice, and soybeans. The good news there is the rainfall totals were not extremely heavy. Certainly 3 to 5 inches is nothing to scoff at. But given the fact that it was extremely dry in the weeks leading up to Francine's arrival, that should help to mitigate some of the concerns. And it certainly limited the amount of flooding that occurred in the Mississippi Delta region.
Portions of Louisiana saw up to 12 inches of rain from that storm. And while farmers are still assessing possible damage to their cotton crops, U.S. cotton yields are expected to hit a 9-year low. The latest USDA survey reporting the all cotton area to be harvested at 8.63 million acres. That's up slightly from last month's forecast and 34% more acres than were harvested last season. However, yield is expected to average 807 pounds per harvested acre, and that's down 33 pounds from last month's forecast and down 92 pounds from last year. Now, prices have remained challenging due to weak demand from big textile producers such as China, Vietnam, and Turkey. Colorado officials have been recapturing wolves they released in the state back in December. Colorado Parks and Wildlife announcing earlier this month they had in fact completed the capture of wolves from the Copper Creek wolf pack. The adult male and female were part of the original wolves we first told you about that were released last December. In addition, 4 pups were captured. The agency said last month it would attempt the capture and relocation of the wolves due to repeated livestock depredation in the area the wolves were living. A report says wolves have killed or injured at least 9 sheep and 15 head of cattle. It's reported the CPW won't relocate the wolves with depredation histories into the wild within Colorado. Cotton was up, but wheat futures were way down. We'll discuss markets with Michelle Rook coming up next. And later, a new innovative feedlot is set to come online in Nebraska. We'll go there and find out what makes it state of the art today in the country. Boar's Head has announced it's closing the Virginia plant tied to a deadly listeria outbreak. The company is saying it will also permanently discontinue production of liverwurst. That's the product linked to the deaths of at least 9 people and hospitalizations of about 50 others in 18 states. Boar's Head said an internal investigation at its Jarrett, Virginia plant found the contamination was the result of a specific production process, adding the process only existed at the Jarrett plant and was only used for liverwurst. The Jarrett plant hasn't been operational since late July when the company recalled more than 7 million pounds of deli meats. Government inspectors reported finding 69 instances of non-compliance at the Jarrett facility over the last year, including instances of mold, insects, liquid droppings from ceilings, and meat and fat residue on the walls. Grains and cattle sliding lower to start the week, with wheat falling double digits. AgDay's Michelle Rook has more on a weaker start to the week in markets now.
Grains all lower on Monday. Mark Schultz with North Star Commodity is back with analysis, and wheat kind of set the tone for the trade on Monday. Mark, it was down, and a lot of that was due to these weather forecasts, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had the change in the weather, and mainly the bigger change took place over in parts of Eastern Europe into Ukraine and Russia. They were on the dry side. Of course, it's spring or winter wheat seeding over there. They needed the moisture, and they certainly got it, and they got it in a big way. So that set the tone there. And then, of course, here in the U.S., looks like we have maybe a little bit of a shift of the rain moving more into Kansas here over the next 6 to 10 days. On that system. And if that's the case, that is the area that wants to start winter wheat seeding here in the U.S. In the late September and early October time period.
And corn was also lower. Was it just following wheat, or did we run up into some chart resistance there? Because we did have a nice higher week last week.
Well, we had the nice move up on Friday, going 7 cents higher, and but yeah, the wheat market certainly, I think, set the tone on everything, and the corn just kind of followed suit, and the beans just kind of bounced around and really didn't know which direction they needed to go yesterday. So to me, you got to get something here. We'll see if we get turnaround Tuesday and see the market try to turn back on up. So we'll see if the demand can start to pick up, if there's some buying on there. The one thing too, I mean, to me, the market's the downward. The trend has changed. If you look at just the way the markets are trading, it looks more like the end user or the funds are buying the dips. They're not selling the rallies anymore at this juncture.
I would agree with you. And we did have some more export business on the soybean front, which certainly helped. But again, that November soybean contract cannot get above chart resistance. What would it take here? And can you do it during harvest?
I think it'll be a challenge to do it during harvest. I think if you go higher here by 20, 30 cents, and the resistance is going to be up between that 1030 to 1040 on November bean here for the resistance level. And I think if you try to move on up, I think you're going to see, especially farmers where the yields are pretty good, you're going to see some farmers unload some of their beans at that price level.
Thanks. Mark Schultz with North Star Commodity. We'll have more Ag Day coming up.
A couple of things we're going to look at. Three main features showing up in the forecast this week across the nation. Obviously, this tropical disturbance bringing, again, rainfall, not necessarily strong winds or even storm surge, but just rain. Tropical downpours through North Carolina up into Virginia. That's number one. Number two, as we work back towards the west, is going to be this little circle right here. That is what's left of the ridge of high pressure that could, again, connect back down here to the south and to the southwest, meaning another very quiet pattern, hot and dry pattern setting up through the Midwest, where that drought is going to get even worse the next couple of days. The third feature, this trough, which traditionally with a weak ridge would bring cooler weather, a cold front to the United States. But the energy from this is going to go up and over that ridge, that very strong ridge, rather than provide any kind of relief for 2/3 of the United States. So again, those are the three main features we're watching this week. This is Wednesday at 6 a.m. See that tropical moisture kind of lags and just lingers on the East Coast, not really moving out, as this pattern is giving way to a very kind of the blocking pattern, giving way to any kind of energy that would lift it to the northeast and just breaking that down with this ridge. So you do get some showers, you do get some energy back up into the Dakotas and into Canada, but it is not surging down to the south or across the United States. Same situation as this one back here. This ridge of high pressure is so strong that the energy is going up and over. It's just a matter of time before this ridge starts to break down and we open things up for more fall-like weather at the United States. Until then, I anticipate it staying dry, hot, and again, that drought getting even worse in parts of the Midwest, while we have extreme rainfall into the Carolinas, as well as rain possibly back up here into the Dakotas, as well as into Wisconsin. So you can kind of see it from the jet stream perspective. Big ridge here, high amplitude ridge, a little reference to that tropical system, that little circle right there. And then any kind of cooling, cloud cover, or rain back out here to the northwest is going to go up and over as it can't break through this ridge of high pressure. And it is quite a ridge for this time of year, leading to consecutive dry days and record-setting drought conditions with no measurable rainfall for portions of the United States. We'll start off with Bowling Green, Kentucky. Mostly sunny, high around 85 degrees. Beaver, Utah, partly cloudy, high of 65, low of 40. Zell, Texas, sunny, high of 92 over there near the Dallas-Fort Worth area, low of 72.
It appears cheese consumption in the U.S. has surged. It's estimated Americans are now eating 42 pounds per capita of cheese annually, more than doubling since the government started keeping track back in 1975. Now, Bloomberg reports now dairy producers are investing billions in cheese production, anticipating that continued demand. It says companies such as Great Lakes Cheese and Sargento Foods are expanding their capacity, while low-carb diets and pandemic-induced home cooking have boosted cheese's popularity. However, industry experts warn of potential oversupply as diet tends to shift. The industry remains hopeful other dairy products will help balance any excess. The 2024 Milk Business Conference award winners have been revealed. The Young Producer Award goes to Perry Baton of Baton Dairy in New Franken, Wisconsin. He took over his parents' farm back in 2012 and has since grown his herd to 700 cows. The Leader in Technology Award will go to GenoSource from Blairstown, Iowa. Today, the 8 families involved in GenoSource milk 4,000 registered Holsteins in a modern 90-stall rotary parlor. And the Employee Excellence Award is going to Joaquin Vasquez of Verclar Farms in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Now, he worked for the farm for nearly 14 years and is currently the farm's assistant herdsman. Now, the awards will be handed out in December at the annual Milk Business Conference taking place in Las Vegas. Up next, innovation at the feedlot. We'll see how this new innovation center in Nebraska will help cattle feeders build and protect their margins next. Work is wrapping up on a new Feedlot Innovation Center at the University of Nebraska. Now, the project all being done to help unlock necessary answers to help producers. As Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan tells us, the team behind it says the new center should be stocked with cattle in the coming weeks.
It's a 240 head individual feeding facility. It's a facility we're using for individual animal management research. There's a lot of interest in what can we do with precision technology to improve beef cattle production, and we have a lot of research planned for this facility in coming years.
The Kopfenstein Feed Technology Center has 36 commercial-sized pens, which will house 60 head across 4 different housing systems.
Really the goal is to do individual management, individual precision technology, look at sensors we can use on cattle, as well as just ways to enhance either welfare, health, performance.
One of the key questions Erickson says they'll uncover here is how to improve nutrient loss from feed yard systems.
We need to do a better job of conserving nutrients. The focus of that in everybody's mind is normally carbon and greenhouse gases. Actually, much of our focus here will be that, but also nitrogen management. So housing systems is one of the greatest ways to change that.
Erickson says bottom line is traditional open lots, which is the most common feed yard housing system today, isn't great at conserving nitrogen. So by placing cattle in these deep pit barns, it's a great way to conserve nitrogen while also revealing other essential answers.
Well, if you put them in these barns, you get to control the elements some. So in the summertime, there's less heat stress, wintertime, less cold stress, but they're also crowded in pretty good. And so we're looking at how do the cattle perform and behave in those systems? How can we manage nutrients in those systems compared to traditional open lots?
There's a lot of global concern about how much cattle are actually contributing to global warming. And so we're trying to answer that question and get involved with actually quantifying those emissions, because there's not a lot of research out there that actually tells us what the cattle are emitting. It's a lot of predictions or estimates.
Rebecca McDermott's PhD work is in beef cattle nutrition and quantifying greenhouse gas emissions of cattle grazing pasture. Her classroom, well, it's this, a 27-acre brome grass pasture where you'll find cattle grazing with GPS collars. From tracking cattle in the pasture to now being able to track cattle's feed consumption with individual ID tags in this feeding system, this research could shape the cattle industry in the years ahead.
When that tag is scanned by this reader, we've decided, does the animal have access to this bunk? Or does the animal have access to this bunk next to it? And we'll have different diets in these bunks that we can compare. So once that animal's ID is read, we've allowed it to either have access or not, and for how long.
The Feedlot Innovation Center is tracking and measuring efficiency at every stage, ending with this finishing facility here. Between the Feed Technology Center, the 2 confinement barns in the middle, and the processing facility on the end, this state-of-the-art Feedlot Innovation Center is truly one of a kind.
I always joke, cattle can't lie. So when we do our randomizations correctly, whatever the cattle perform in these two different systems, that's what the two systems tell us, because the cattle can't fool you. I think we'll have real world application and things that producers can adopt tomorrow.
Reporting for AgDay, I'm Tyne Morgan.
All right, thanks, Tyne, and she'll have more on the latest technology at land-grant universities this weekend as the U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow travels to Iowa State. So be sure to watch out for that. And that's all the time we have this morning. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day on the Farm Country.